silence, rustling grass, and somewhere in the distance, the soft crackle of a dying campfire. Before you, the sky, stars, motionless and endless, and there is nothing but light, darkness, and the breath of night. This is how, perhaps, the first story of humanity began. Long ago, when there were no cities, temples, or words, there were only people and the sky above their heads. In that era, which no scroll preserved, our distant ancestors emerged from caves and, frozen, looked up. Above them, fires scattered, a multitude of shining points appearing in the same place every night. They could not explain what it was, but even then, the stars became something more than just light in the darkness. For millennia, night was not a time for rest, but a realm of the unknown. Predators, fear, and wonders lurked within it, and the stars, these silent guardians of the heavens, seemed eternal, unchanging, reliable. People began to distinguish their shapes. Some stars formed lines, others circles. Somewhere, figures of beasts, hunters, birds were born. Thus, the first constellations appeared, not drawn on paper, but imagined in the sky, in a space accessible only to those who knew how to look. The starry sky became the first canvas on which man began to draw meaning, first by instinct, then by myth. He connected the brilliance of a star with spirits, with the souls of ancestors, with gods who watched over life on earth. In one part of the world, people believed that stars were the eyes of the dead. In another, that they were sparkling fragments of a celestial chariot. In a third, that each star was a separate divine mind watching over its people. In a fourth, that they were drops of light flowing from the wounds of the universe. And each of these myths is not just a fairy tale, but the first attempt to understand oneself and the world around. What does a person feel at night under the stars? Silence, grandeur, and loneliness. He is small. He is mortal. But when he looks up, he becomes part of something great. The sky has no walls. It does not yield to time. And if the stars burned yesterday, burn today, and perhaps will burn tomorrow, it means there is meaning in this. And man strives to find it. It was in the sky that man first felt connected to something eternal. He began to remember where and when certain stars appeared. He noticed that some of them disappeared, only to return after many months. Thus, the first understanding of time, stellar time, emerged. It had no numbers, but it had a rhythm. People began to live by the sky. Hunters went on searches when a special star rose. Farmers waited for the return of a bright point on the horizon to begin sowing. Women calculated the phases of the moon. Men oriented themselves by the Milky Way. And if the sun taught man to live by day, the stars taught him to live with a sense of mystery. Every evening, like a curtain, darkness fell, and against its backdrop, another world opened. A world not for the eyes, but for the soul. And man tried to understand this world, not yet knowing mathematics, astronomy, or science. He understood with his heart, with dreams, with tales. He began to tell. He began to dream. Somewhere on earth, on one of those evenings, an ancient storyteller sat by the fire and, looking at the sky, began to speak. He pointed to a star and said, "Here is a deer. It is running. It leads us to where spring will begin." And others looked there too and saw the deer. Thus, from a point of light, a tale was born, a map, a myth. The sky became humanity's library even before words appeared. It recorded not letters, but meanings. Stars became anchors for memory, and every civilization, wherever it appeared, instinctively raised its head upwards to find itself in this chaos of light. For some, it was a dragon. For some, a fish. For some, the soul of a woman who ascended to heaven after death. But all of them, regardless of language, skin, and era, felt one thing. The sky is not just above us. It is within us. And with this thought, we will go further, following in the footsteps of those who tried not just to look at the sky, but to understand it. We will travel through centuries, peoples, and legends to see how the first star maps were born, how they intertwined with faith, fear, and hope. How man, step by step, transformed the chaos of stars into the music of meaning. And this journey begins right here, in silence, under the flickering lights, frozen in eternity. In the distant depths of time, long before the advent of writing, before the first cities and temples, man already looked at the sky. In that era, which we call prehistoric, the stars were not just an adornment of the night. They became part of life, part of the inner world that began to take shape. Those people who left behind only flint tools and drawings on cave walls already had an intuitive need for observation. Their memory was collective, passed down not through words, but through gestures, rhythms, rituals. And the sky was a constant, above the plains, above the mountains, above the campsites and caves. The stars remained unchanged. They did not disappear when the elders died. They were beyond time, and that is why they became landmarks before navigation was born. They became time markers before calendars arose, and they became symbols before writing appeared. Today, archaeologists and scientists are painstakingly piecing together traces of those times. In the Nabta Playa Desert in southern Egypt, where today there is only sand and wind, there was once life. More than 7,000 years ago, stone circles stood there, built with astonishing precision. Their axes pointed to the heliacal rising of Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky. This was not just a coincidence. It was a deliberate act of observation and remembrance. The sky became part of the ritual, and somewhere in the distant north, on the plains of Britain, Stonehenge arose, a monument whose exact purpose still remains a mystery. But one thing is clear: it is connected to the sky. The stone blocks are placed in such a way as to mark the moments of the summer and winter solstices. People gathered there to watch the sun rise or set behind certain stones on a strictly defined day of the year. This means that they knew how to track the movement of celestial bodies. They knew how to extract patterns. They knew how to connect it with life. In Ireland, there is the Newgrange Sanctuary, built more than 5,000 years ago. On the day of the winter solstice, a sunbeam penetrates through a narrow passage and illuminates a chamber hidden inside the hill. This precision, this understanding of cycles, suggests that the ancients knew not only about the stars, but also about time. They marked when the new year began, when the day became longer, when the light returned, and all this thanks to observing the sky. Even in caves, seemingly completely isolated from the outside world, people left traces of stars. On the ceilings of some caves in France and Spain, points, lines, and circles were found, which, according to researchers, could depict groups of stars. For example, in the Lascaux cave, One of the animal figures, a bull, is accompanied by a group of dots resembling the Pleiades constellation. This may be a coincidence, or it may be the first step toward a star map. But if a person left this image on stone, it means he considered it important and perhaps sacred. Why did the ancients so carefully observe the sky? The answer is simple. The sky provided rhythm. There was logic in it. Unlike the whims of nature and the dangers of the earth, the stars were stable. They rose at the same time of year. Their appearance coincided with the onset of warmth or the arrival of cold. They became signals. As soon as a certain constellation appeared, hunting began, migration, preparation for winter. People did not know that these were gases, plasma, light years, but they knew that the stars were landmarks, and they used them to survive. The Milky Way, a shimmering band stretching across the entire night sky, also did not go unnoticed. In many cultures, it was a road. In Australia, the road of ancestral spirits. Among northern peoples, the path of deer. In Africa, a river. It connected the living and the dead, the past and the future. People looked at it and felt that their path did not end here on earth. Somewhere out there, in the glowing ribbon, there was a continuation. Traces of ancient astronomy are also found in South America. The Nazca geoglyphs, giant images stretched on the ground, visible only from above, may be oriented toward celestial bodies. Some researchers believe that the lines coincide with the direction of the sunrise or the position of stars at certain times of the year. And although there is no definitive answer, the question remains, why create such precise landmarks if not for celestial observations? In all these examples, there is a common thread. Observing the stars was not an abstract science for ancient man. It was an action full of meaning. Looking at the sky meant coming into contact with the eternal. It was a ritual, a spiritual practice, magic. In a world without calendars, schools, and written instructions, the stars were a textbook, a clock, and a fairy tale all at once. And one more important detail. In each of these places, on every continent, in every culture, the stars became something personal. Each people had its own shapes, its own images. Some saw wolves in the stars, some boats, some spirits guarding children. And this speaks to a great truth. The sky is one for all, but each people saw its own reflection in it. Perhaps this is why stars have so firmly entered human consciousness. They are common. They are a mirror. Who you are, where you are, who you were, does not matter. When you look at the stars, you become the one who looked at them thousands of years ago. You enter the same river of meaning. You continue the ancient ritual, and we will continue it with you. In the following chapters, we will go further to the times when stars received names, when people began to record their movements, when the sky became not only a myth, but also the beginning of science. But do not forget, it all began here, on earth full of fear, cold, and nights, where the first comfort came from the sky, from the first glance at the eternal light in endless darkness. On the banks of two great rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, where the lands were fertile and the sky was clear, one of humanity's most ancient civilizations flourished. The Sumerians, and later the Babylonians, did not merely observe the stars. They began to transform the sky into a language, into a system, into knowledge that was meant to explain the structure of the universe and the meaning of human life. Night after night, generation after generation, the priests of these peoples ascended to the tops of the ziggurat temples. They peered into the sky, recorded observations on clay tablets, checked the positions of the stars, and correlated them with events on earth. Where for other peoples there were only myths, in Mesopotamia, science began. But it was a science not yet separated from magic. For the Sumerians, the sky was the dwelling place of the gods. Every luminous object in the firmament had its master. Venus, one of the brightest and most changeable stars, was the goddess Inanna, mistress of love and war. Its appearance in the morning or evening sky was considered a sign, sometimes good, sometimes ominous. Mars was associated with aggression and danger. Jupiter was a sign of royal power. The moon and the sun, great celestial deities, equal in power to any human. The sky was divided into 3 zones, each belonging to one of the supreme gods: Anu, Enlil, and Ea. These zones represented the paths along which stars and planets moved. Such a division allowed priests to predict their appearance, interpret their movement, and advise kings and nobles. But the Sumerians did not just observe. They told stories. They wrote myths. One of the oldest is the cosmogonic epic about the creation of the world, in which stars arise as a result of a battle between gods. The Epic of Gilgamesh mentions stars as harbingers of fate. The hero himself, as some researchers suggest, had a connection with a certain constellation, possibly Orion, one of the brightest in the sky. When power passed to the Babylonians, observations became even more precise. They began to record the phases of the moon, the movements of planets, the appearance and disappearance of stars. These records were kept for centuries. One of the most important finds is a tablet called Mul Apin, dating back to approximately the 7th century BC. It contains a classification of stars and descriptions of their movements. About 50 constellations are indicated there. This is no longer a myth, but a systematization. This is a star map. But the Babylonians did not separate the cosmos from fate. For them, celestial bodies were like words in a vast, living language. Every rise and fall of a star could be a harbinger of a flood, a defeat in battle, the birth of an heir. They believed that the future could be read in the stars. Thus, astrology was born, an attempt to understand fate through the movement of the heavens. Every morning, the Babylonian king could begin by reading not the stars themselves, but their interpretations. Servants brought clay tablets with forecasts compiled from observations. If, for example, Saturn entered the zone of Enlil, it could mean trouble for the ruler. If Venus shone particularly brightly, it foretold love, fertility, victory. For them, there was no emptiness in the sky. Everything was filled with meaning. Even interstellar spaces were the abode of invisible forces. Therefore, the celestial maps of the Babylonians were not just diagrams. They were sacred texts, frozen in drawings. A special place was occupied by the zodiac. In the Babylonian version, it was divided into 12 sections, corresponding to certain star groups. This division formed the basis of later Greek and modern astrology. That is, every time we say today that someone is a Taurus by zodiac sign, we, without knowing it, are quoting the sky of Mesopotamia. Another amazing point is the accuracy of observations. Babylonian priests predicted lunar and solar eclipses. They could determine the moments of equinoxes with high accuracy. They even kept tables in which various astronomical cycles were compared. This was not just blind faith in symbolism. It was early mathematics, complex and precise. But for all its scientific rigor, the human being remained at the center of the Babylonian worldview, connected to the stars, but not equal to them. He was subject to their will, their movements. He lived within a predetermined order. And this is what gave meaning to the star maps. They were not just maps of the sky. They were maps of destiny. And when we look today at images of Babylonian star maps preserved on clay, we see not just inscriptions. We see humanity's attempt to build a bridge between Earth and the cosmos. We see how faith grew out of observation, knowledge grew out of faith, and hope grew out of knowledge. Because everyone who looked at the sky, including the Babylonian priest, wanted one thing: to understand why we are here and where the path of light scattered above us leads. In the east, amidst the sands and valleys, where the great river slowly flows through time, arose Egypt, the kingdom of pharaohs, pyramids, and eternity. And as the Nile was the artery of earthly life, so the sky became for the Egyptians a celestial river, along which the sun god Ra sailed every night, conquering darkness and returning to the east with the first ray of a new day. The Egyptians did not view the sky as a distant and cold space. For them, it was alive. It breathed, moved, protected. It was the body of the goddess Nut, whose arched body stretched over the earth, and the stars were her body, her tears, her breath. Every sunrise was her birth, every eclipse her pain, every movement of a star her gesture. This was not an abstract allegory. It was a religious truth, the foundation of Egyptian existence. The most important star for Egypt was Sothis, as Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky, was called. Its first appearance in the morning sky after a long disappearance heralded the flooding of the Nile, a sacred and vital event. Without water, there was no harvest. Without harvest, no life. And the star announcing the water became a symbol of rebirth, the beginning of the year, the promise of fertility. It is no coincidence that the beginning of the Egyptian calendar was linked precisely to its rising. The Egyptian calendar was not a simple set of days, but a sacred mechanism harmonized with the cycles of the sun and stars. It had 3 seasons: inundation, planting, harvest. Each had celestial markers. The Egyptian year consisted of 360 days, and then 5 special, out-of-time, sacred, dangerous, transitional days were added. All this was built according to celestial cues. The temples of Egypt were not only homes for gods, but also observatories. Their axes were often aligned precisely with the position of the sun on certain days of the year. The temple in Karnak, for example, at sunrise during the winter solstice, was filled with light, passing through long rows of columns, as if through a stone tunnel. The light led inward to the Holy of Holies. It was not just beautiful, it was calculated. The temple became a reflection of the celestial order on earth. But a special place in celestial architecture was occupied by tombs. The ceilings of royal burial chambers were covered with images of stars. Some of them were precise maps. In the Valley of the Kings, there are tombs where stellar diagrams have been preserved, representing the actual positions of stars at certain moments. These were not only decorations, but also guides. The pharaoh did not disappear after death. He journeyed to the sky to join the stars, to become one of them. And the star maps in his tomb served as a map of the afterlife journey. Orion, one of the most recognizable constellations, was associated with the god Osiris, Lord of the Dead. His belt, 3 stars in a row, became a symbol of Trinity, order, masculine power. The pyramids at Giza, as some researchers suggest, may have been built in accordance with the position of these 3 stars. This means that Egyptian architecture is not only stone, but also stars, frozen in the geometry of the earth. Solar and lunar cycles were used in festivals, rites, and rituals. The new moon was a time of silence, observation. The full moon, a time of action. Stars served not just as guides, they were participants in a sacred theater. And every Egyptian, looking at the sky, saw not emptiness, but drama. Every god had its place in the heavens. Every myth, its reflection in the star map. There is also a mysterious document known as the star clock, found on the ceilings of tombs, which indicates the stellar hours of the night. Each star rises at a specific hour, and each is associated with a specific goddess sailing along the celestial river. This was a kind of night calendar, allowing priests to orient themselves in time even without the sun. The Egyptians believed that the ruler after death united with the heavens. He became a star, or his soul sailed in the boat of Ra, the sun, which journeys through the afterlife every night. Stars were not only a reflection of order, but also a gateway between worlds. Through them, one could enter eternity. For Egypt, the sky was not just a panorama. It was an instruction. It was a stage. It was a gateway. And the map of the sky was the key to understanding how this civilization lived, in the rhythm of light and darkness, in harmony with the cosmos, in the aspiration not just to live, but to live in accordance with eternal order. Therefore, when we look at ancient Egyptian depictions of stars, we see not only symbolism, we see their prayers, their knowledge, their fear and hope. We see how they turned the sky into a temple, the stars into words, and time into a path. And we move on, beyond the horizons of the Nile, beyond the desert temples and tombs, to those lands where the night sky was also a living being. To China, the land of emperors and celestial beasts, where the star map was not only on a scroll, but also in the heart of governing an entire world. As day ended over ancient China, and the sky became a boundless silk cloth embroidered with stars, it was time for other laws. Silence descended from the heavens. Not just lights moved across it, but signs. And every sign had meaning, because in Chinese tradition, the sky is not just a space. It is the emperor above all emperors. It observes, judges, and grants harmony. And man, if he is wise, learns to read its language. The ancient Chinese called the sky Tian, the supreme power on which everything depends. Fate, order, power, the rhythm of the year, and the stars on its surface are both writings, beings, and guardians. They are not separated from the world of humans. They govern it. They are its celestial reflection. One of China's oldest traditions was the division of the sky into 28 lunar mansions, or Shiyu, nakshatras as they would be called in India. This was not just a technical division. Each mansion represented a section of the sky through which the moon passes during the night. These zones became a kind of lunar zodiac. They are not equal in size, but are equal in significance. Each had a name, an image, symbolism, and sometimes even a patron animal. These mansions were grouped into 4 large sectors, known as the 4 sacred beasts. These were the eastern dragon, southern bird, western tiger, and northern tortoise. Each symbolized a cardinal direction, a season, an element, and even a virtue. These creatures were not myths. They were part of reality. They were depicted on tombs, armor, flags, and their stellar forms were seen in the sky, reminding of the great cycle of creation. According to Chinese tradition, stars had a direct relation to the state. In the sky, there was a model of ideal order, and the emperor, called the Son of Heaven, was supposed to embody it on earth. If eclipses occurred, unusual appearances of comets, or stars behaved differently than usual, it was considered an omen. Perhaps there was disorder in the state. Perhaps the ruler had violated harmony. Such phenomena could be equated with portents of disaster. The sky spoke, and the wise ruler had to listen. Therefore, in all dynasties, there were special officials, astronomers, whose duty was not only to observe celestial bodies, but also to compile predictions, calendars, and interpretations. These people held high positions at court. They compiled almanacs of fate, which indicated auspicious and inauspicious days for marriage, construction, travel, and even haircuts. Their work combined astronomy, philosophy, state power, and art. The Chinese began recording their observations very early. Already in the 2nd millennium BC, the first systematic records appeared. They noted eclipses, comet movements, and the appearance of new stars. Some of these records have survived to this day and have helped modern astronomers confirm real cosmic events. Thus, ancient Chinese star maps are not just myths, but valuable historical documents. Stars were not something distant. They lived within the calendar. The Chinese calendar, based on lunisolar cycles, was a complex system in which each phase of the moon, each month, each year, had its stellar correspondences. Even the Chinese zodiac, familiar to many by the signs of the rat, ox, dragon, and so on, is connected with celestial cycles. Each year was under the patronage of a certain animal and element, and the entire system closed in a 60-year cycle. This was not just a measurement of time. It was a cosmological model by which entire dynasties lived. The star map in China was often depicted on scrolls, on the ceilings of temples and tombs. In one of the Han Dynasty tombs, a magnificent starry sky with the precise positions of many well-known stars has been preserved. This image is not just decorative. It is a guide to the afterlife, a map for the soul, a guide by which one can journey from life to immortality. Even the Milky Way itself had a legend in China. It was called the Celestial River. There was a myth about a cowherd and a weaver girl, stars separated by this river, who can only meet once a year, on the 7th day of the 7th month. On this day, a bridge of magpies appears in the sky, and the starry lovers reunite. This is a touching story told to children, but it contains a deep cultural code. Even stars are subject to love and time. The sky in Chinese culture was deeply connected with philosophy. Confucianism taught to follow the way of heaven, Tiandao, through virtue, order, and respect for rituals. Taoism saw in the stars the embodiment of the Tao. the great way that cannot be described in words, but can be felt in the stillness of the night. Meditation under the stars, breathing in the rhythm of the sky, contemplation, all this was part of spiritual practice. The emperor was not merely a ruler. He was a living link between heaven and earth, and his court, his actions, even the layout of the capital had to correspond to the celestial pattern. Cities were designed according to the cardinal directions. Palaces were aligned with lines symbolizing the axes of the world. Everything in China was a reflection of the stellar order, earth like heaven. When we look at Chinese star maps today, we see not just dots. We see a universe structured according to the laws of wisdom. We see respect for time, for rhythm, for the breath of the world. We see how man became an extension of the cosmos, not its master. And when night falls over China, wherever you are, you can imagine an ancient scholar in silk robes looking at the sky, making marks on a scroll, and gazing at the light of a distant star, whispering, "Everything is connected. Everything is in order. Everything has meaning." Now we will go further, to the south, to where the brilliance of the stars was woven into the carpets of science, poetry, and faith, to a world where Arab astronomers continued the path of Hellas and mystics sought the reflection of God in the starry sky, to the lands of Islam, into the golden age of Arabic astronomy. Night. Over the rooftops of ancient Baghdad, the starry sky quietly shimmers. The heat has passed, the city has fallen asleep, and on the towers of observatories, solitary figures continue their observations. They are not seeking prophecies, they are seeking truth. In an era when Europe was plunged into the darkness of the Middle Ages, in the lands of Islam, a light of knowledge was born, soft, warm, patient, and this light was directed upward, to the stars. When the Arab civilization reached its zenith, it did not merely inherit the knowledge of antiquity, it multiplied it. Translators in the houses of wisdom in Baghdad meticulously transferred the works of Ptolemy, Hipparchus, and Aristotle into Arabic. But these works did not remain a dead weight of the past. They became the basis for a new perspective on the sky, attentive, precise, almost modern. In Islamic culture, science was not the opposite of faith. On the contrary, the study of the universe was considered a godly deed. The Quran repeatedly calls to look at the sky, to reflect, to observe, to seek signs. Stars are mentioned as guides, as ornaments of the heavens, as signs for those who reflect. And so, astronomy became an integral part of scientific and religious life. Great minds, such as al-Battani, al-Sufi, al-Biruni, Ulugh Beg, and many others, dedicated their lives to the stars. They compiled star catalogs with incredible precision. They measured the movements of planets, calculated the length of the year, predicted eclipses, and all this without telescopes, only with astrolabes, quadrants, rulers, and a sharp, patient eye. Al-Battani, in the 9th century, recalculated the coordinates of many stars, correcting Ptolemy's errors. He accurately determined the length of the solar year, 365 days, 5 hours, and almost 49 minutes. His tables were used in Europe until the time of Copernicus, and al-Sufi was the first to describe what we now know as the Andromeda Nebula, a faint smudge of light in the night sky. He saw it not as an object, but as a mystery worthy of attention. The observatories of the Islamic era were true scientific temples. In Marageh, Persia, one of the first large-scale observatories was built, where dozens of scientists worked. Later, in Samarkand, Ulugh Beg, a ruler, poet, and mathematician, built a huge observatory with a sextant more than 40 meters long. He personally observed the stars and created one of the most accurate star catalogs of his time, containing the coordinates of more than 1,100 stars. But even before the instruments, and beyond them, the most important achievement of Islamic astronomy was its attitude towards the sky. It was not only an object of knowledge, but also a symbol of order, beauty, and divine harmony. Contemplation of the stars was a spiritual practice for Sufis. They said, "He who looks at the stars learns to be silent, and in this silence, knowledge comes." Stars also had practical significance. Muslims determined the direction of prayer, the Qibla, by observing the stars. Navigation in deserts and seas was also based on stellar landmarks. Astronomical knowledge was necessary for determining the beginning of sacred months, especially Ramadan, and also for calculating the time of Salat, the prayer performed strictly at certain hours of the day and night. The astrolabe, a symbol of Islamic science, became a universal instrument. With its help, one could measure the angle between the horizon and a celestial body, determine the latitude of a place, the time of day, and the direction to Mecca. It was not just a technique, it was the embodiment of human aspiration to measure the unimaginable. Star maps created in the Islamic world were not only scientific diagrams, but also works of art. They depicted constellations in the form of animals, heroes, and creatures in a tradition dating back to Hipparchus, but executed with Eastern sophistication. These maps were accompanied by inscriptions in Arabic, indicating the names of the stars, their coordinates, and brightness. Many of these names have been preserved in modern astronomical language: Altair, Aldebaran, Betelgeuse, Vega. All these are Arabic names that have come down to us through the centuries. Interestingly, the geocentric model of the universe, inherited from Ptolemy, continued to dominate in the Islamic world for a long time. However, some scholars began to doubt its absolute truth. Al-Biruni, for example, made cautious assumptions about the Earth's rotation, but these were still seeds that had not yet sprouted into discovery. Nevertheless, Islamic science paved the way for future revolutions. It preserved the knowledge of antiquity, enriched it, and transmitted it to Europe. Without it, perhaps there would have been no Copernicus, Galileo, or Kepler. There would have been no maps of stars by which we study the universe today. And all this was born in the silence of the night, in cities where books were read by the light of oil lamps, in deserts where the stars shone especially clearly, in minds that combined faith and reason, precision and poetry. Because the sky is for everyone, it is one. But each people and each century looks at it in its own way. And now, as we have completed our journey through the stellar worlds of the ancients, we will pause for a moment. We will look at the sky not through the eyes of a priest, philosopher, or astronomer, but as a person who seeks silence and meaning. Because in the very end, among all the knowledge, myths, and calculations, one thing remains. The stars speak to the soul. In the next and final part, we will slow down together to hear what the stars are silent about. When the city outside quiets down and one by one stars ignite in the dark sky. You feel their closeness again. You are not an ancient priest, not a philosopher, not a navigator. You are just a human being, and you look at the sky, just as millions before you did, just as millions after you will do. And in this simple silence, there is something more than meets the eye. Throughout our journey, we have seen how stars became a reflection of faith, science, power, fear, and hope. We have traveled through lands where stars were gods, where they became letters on a celestial scroll, where they revealed the rhythms of time and showed the way. And in every culture, despite the differences, there was something in common: the feeling that the sky speaks. It speaks to everyone who knows how to listen. But what does it say? Perhaps it speaks of infinity. For every time one looks at the stars, one feels the scale. The body remains on earth, but the gaze extends upward where there are no boundaries. In this feeling, there is both awe and comfort. You are small, but you see the great. You are mortal, but you look into eternity. Perhaps the sky speaks of memory, for the light of distant stars is the light of the past. Those fires you see may have died out thousands of years ago, but their radiance reaches us only now. This means that nothing disappears immediately. This means that everything we were, everything we felt, everything we loved, does not vanish without a trace. It continues its journey, and someone, someday, will see it. And perhaps the sky speaks of silence, of an inner deep silence that we rarely touch. The stars do not make noise, they do not demand attention, they simply exist, silently, persistently, constantly. And in this lies their power. They teach us to listen without words, to feel without explanations, to be without haste. When you look up at the sky, you meet yourself. There, among the stars, you're not looking for answers, but for resonance. Who are you? Where are you from? Where are you going? Why are you here? These questions resonate within you not as anxiety, but as music. And the stars are the notes of this music. Modern science tells us about billions of galaxies, about star systems, black holes, neutron stars, supernovae, quasars. It is amazing, it is beautiful, it is complex. But despite all this, our feeling about the stars remains the same. Not rational, but sensual. We feel that it is important, that it is for us. Stars have witnessed everything: the first campfires, the first words, the first steps. They saw how man drew them on cave walls, how he built stone circles, how he wrote myths and composed hymns, how he argued about orbital shapes and calculated angles of inclination. They saw us in all our guises, and all this time they remained in place, twinkling, observing. And now we live among screens, signals, light, in cities where stars are not visible. And yet, when there is an opportunity to go outside, turn off the noise, lie on the grass, and just look up, something awakens within us, something ancient, something that has not changed since man first looked up. This feeling needs no proof. It simply exists. A quiet joy, a tender longing, a light that touches the soul. And it is for this feeling that we continue to look up. In dreams, stars are especially close. When everything around quiets down, the mind slows, and perception becomes soft, we can hear a voice that comes not from lips, but from light. This is not a fairy tale. This is truth. The truth that the sky is not just above our heads. It is a space within us, our dreams, our longing, our childhood, our memory. When you fall asleep, the stars do not disappear. They continue to burn, and perhaps they are watching you, or waiting for you to join them, because in the end, as the ancients said, the soul is a star that descended to earth, and when its journey is complete, it returns home. Old civilizations knew this. That is why they built maps not for ships, but for souls, not for a compass, but for the heart. These maps do not gather dust in museums. They live within us. Every time we look at the dark sky and feel anxiety recede, our breath slow, and peace grow within us. It is them, the stars, our eternal guides. And here you are, on the border of sleep. The stars outside the window twinkle, and their light softly touches your eyelids. There is no need to rush. Everything is fine. Everything is in its place. The sky is in place. The stars are in place. And you are too. Sleep peacefully. The light of the stars is near.